Should you choose the Carver C5, CX, or C7? I get asked that question a lot, so I wanted to do a dedicated video where I just answer it one time. Let's start with the easy one, the C5. The C5 was actually the last one that they made of these three. They made the C7 first, then the CX, and then the C5. And they made the C7 and CX to be traditional surf skates, and then they made the C5 to be more of a transition board for traditional skateboarders. So when you compare the CX to the C5, you'll notice that in terms of their mechanic functionality, they're built essentially the same. It's a reverse kingpin design, which means that your kingpin is on the same side as your pivot point, and that gives you that range of motion that you need for a surf skate. The differences between the two is that the C5 has a narrower hanger, it's lower to the ground, it also has a hollow kingpin and axles, which makes it lighter than the CX. Carver only has two C5 models on their website, and both of them are this traditional skateboard design that have both a tail and a nose on them. So what this means is the C5 is for traditional skateboarders who want a little bit more of a surfy feel to their skateboard. But if you don't come from a traditional skateboarding background, you're probably not going to like the C5. You're probably going to want to choose either the CX or the C7. So that leaves us with the CX and the C7, and here's where it gets a little bit more difficult. The simplest and most general answer is, if you're a surfer and you're looking for a pure surf trainer, you probably want to go with the C7. And if you're a non-surfer just looking for a general surf skate, then you probably want to go with the CX. Now for non-surfers like me, I feel very confident in that recommendation and saying if you're a non-surfer, start with the CX. You may like the C7 and you may even like it better than the CX, but when you compare all of the aspects together for non-surfers, I'm going to recommend for non-surfers, start with the CX over the C7. But if you're a surfer, that's where it gets a little bit more nuanced because you have some disagreement amongst surfers on whether the CX or the C7 is the better surf trainer. Now, as a non-surfer, I obviously am not going to be a big help in that regard. However, I've spent a couple years in this space and I've talked to a lot of surfers, I've done a lot of surveys and polls, and it's the general consensus that most surfers prefer the C7 over the CX for pure surf training. And later in this video, you're going to hear from a bunch of surfers who are going to help you answer that question as well. But for now, let me kind of just walk you through the differences between the CX and the C7 to help you decide. So the Carver C7 is the original surfskate truck, the first one released in 1996, and it is called a dual axis system, which means it has two dimensions of motion. The first is this motion right here, the lateral swinging arm. The second dimension of motion comes from this hanger, where just like on a traditional skateboard or longboard, you're going to get that lean from side to side on that hanger. So with the C7, you're getting both sway and lean. This rotating arm is driven by a compression spring that runs down along here, and that compression spring is adjustable using this bolt right there. And so that means you actually have two ways to adjust the C7. You can adjust the tightness of that spring, or you can also adjust the tightness of your kingpin nut. The CX is a much simpler design. It's what's called a single axis system, which means it only has this one dimension of motion. But the way it's designed, it gives you quite a big range of motion, and you can do pretty much anything on the CX that you can do on the C7. The difference in feel between them is that the C7 feels a little bit softer, looser, and flowier, and the CX feels tighter and snappier. But there's even some nuance to that because you can modify the CX, you can change out the bushings to make it softer, looser, and flowier. So Riptide offers bushings for the CX in 5 different durometers, and the Carver CX comes standard in 89A durometer, which means that these yellow 90A are going to be the closest in feel. But if you want something looser, softer, flowier, you can go with the softer 87.5A or even down to the 85A. So by modifying the CX with bushings, you can actually make it feel a little bit more like the C7 and a little bit surfier. Another thing to mention is that the CX is lighter than the C7, so the front CX truck weighs just under 15 ounces and the front C7 truck weighs just under 1 pound 6 ounces. After trying more than 70 surf skates with more than 30 different surf skate truck systems, for me, I would say that the CX is the most universal and versatile surf skate truck to do everything that you'd want to do, and it's also the most lightweight. So with it being a simpler design, it weighing less than the C7, and you having the ability to modify it with those bushings, for me, the CX is the winner. But I would say, whether you're a surfer or a non-surfer, the CX is probably the more universal and versatile truck of the two. I would also say that if your riding style is tight, sharp performance riding with a lot of snaps and slides, then you probably want to go with the CX over the C7. But if your riding style is looser, flowier, with longer drawn out lines, then the C7 may feel better for you. So if you're a surfer looking for a surf trainer specifically, you still might want to go with the C7. But if you want something that's a little bit more universal and versatile, that you can do more than just pure surf training on it, then I'm probably going to say start on the CX, and then later, if you want, you can try the C7. So that's my personal take, and with all of that said, now let's hear from some surfers to hear what they have to say to help you make the decision.
Hi, I'm Ace Allen, and I've been surfing for over 20 years. Though I do like riding shortboards most of the time, I ride everything depending on the waves. I'd recommend that surfers start with the CX for surf training, and that's because of its versatility. You can use it for flat land, you can use it in the bowls and the parks, you can use it at the pump track, and you really don't need to do too much adjustment, if any, between those different spots.
Hey, what's going on? I'm Joey Daly, Oceanside, California. I've been surfing about 8 to 10 years now. I have a somewhat loose and fast approach. I ride specifically shortboards. The longest board I've ridden is about 6, 8 to 7 foot. I would recommend the C7 specifically for surf training, whereas the CX, I believe, kind of dives into that hybrid feel, whereas you get kind of more street play and you don't have to focus as much on surf movements.
My name is Gabe Frager. I've been surfing for about 4 years now. I ride shortboard and longboard, just depending on the conditions and how I'm feeling that day. For a surf skater that's looking into trying surf skating specifically for surf training between the CX and C7, what I would recommend is the C7 because it feels a little bit more flowy and cruisy-like. I can really still get into my turns and cutbacks. I don't have any problems trying to stall it out to go slower or anything like that. And it kind of feels like a shortboard. I'm not sure if it has the same longboard feel, but it still has a surfboard-like feel.
Hey everyone, my name is John Crawford. As far as surfboards go, I like the Mini Mows, which are miniature longboards, mid-lengths, longboards. I've been riding all of those for 20 plus years. As far as surf training goes, out of the box, for years I rode the C7. Really liked that a lot. That's what I started on. I felt like it was easier to get going on. I felt like the CX was a little harder to get going on, get pumping. But now with the Riptide bushing upgrade, the CX truck is totally different. It pumps really easily if you get the right bushings, and it does feel more akin to the C7. It's a lighter setup, so there's that to consider, especially if you're doing more skateboard type tricks. I think the C7 is great for people that ride retro type shapes, so fishes and mid-lengths and that kind of stuff. I think the flow of the C7 is probably more to your liking. If you're riding thrusters and doing more aerial type stuff, then probably the CX is going to be your better bet. I like the pump and flow of the CX just as much as I do the C7, so you really can't go wrong with either system. And if you had the money, I'd almost say get both systems because they do offer something just a little bit different.
My name is Lucy. I am originally from Donegal in Ireland, but have been living in California for the past year. I started surfing when I was in my teens, but started to go more regularly within the last 3 years. I surf a 6'8" board. I don't do any crazy maneuvers or any big waves. I just like to cruise. So during COVID, like many people, I couldn't get down to the beach. So started looking into Surfskate boards. My favorite one, the one I'm using right now, is this Carver, the Triton section of Carver. And I went for CX trucks. This board's perfect. It's 31 inches, really stable for CX trucks. I really like this one in particular because it lets me drop into bowls in skate parks, which was really important for generating the kind of the speed I wanted and even just like the pumping on the walls of the bowl. So it's been really, really good for that. I do think that the CX is a really good board for learning pumping. It can handle a lot of speed. The C7 I have tried definitely feels a lot less stable and I think is harder to drop in with. Those boards I do think it's easier to do frontside and backside snaps with. You can still do them on this, but I think it takes a little extra leg work. But for me, this is the one that I love, and it's been a great board, really sturdy, and has lasted through a lot.
What's up, everyone? Jeremy Cohenauer.
Michael Reeser.
We surfed for 2 years now. Now we surf epoxy boards. I have an 8.2 Kennedy surfboard.
I've got an 8-foot Aloha epoxy.
Yeah, not like super advanced, but definitely intermediate surfers. I mean, I can cut down the line now, and I'm really starting to be able to use that maneuver that you learn from Surfskate. What I would recommend, the C7, to start off.
If you want to learn how to surf and you're just starting out, get a C7.
And that said, I do have a Smooth Star as well, and I found that to be a really true surf trainer versus the other applications of a Carver.
Yeah, and that is the nice thing. Like, Carvers are really good at surf training, but they kind of double as like a longboard.
They're great.
Or like you want to cruise, go to the market, or just
you can use them really well in a skate park or a pump track.
Yeah, but the Smooth Stars are a little too. They don't work well with like a lot of travel. Those are like just for
confined
cone drills and working on your S-turns.
But that is the most surfy feeling.
Hi, my name's Olivia. I started surfing 6 years ago and I currently surf 9.1 single fin. I started surf skating about 2 years ago. Both you can use your surfing techniques, but with this one you can really get that surfing feel. This one I recommend mostly for flat ground if you really want to train your surfing. If you really want to skate the pool, then I recommend to go for the CX. But for surf training, I recommend the C7 because you can really use those surfing techniques and have a surf feel.
My name is Owen. I've been surfing for a few years and I mainly longboard. I ride around a 9-foot log and I gotta recommend the Carver CX truck for surfers looking to get into surf training. I think the CX feels more natural and more flowy, whereas the C7 feels more mechanical and forced. I think they're both great, and you can't go wrong with either of them, but the CX does feel flowier in my opinion, and I like it given a longboarding background.
Hi, my name is Lance Weiss. I started surfing when I was 13, and I have several decades worth of surfing underneath me. I grew up shortboarding, then went to longboarding, and then back to shortboarding, like a 6'1", 6'2". As far as my style goes, nothing super progressive. A couple cutbacks on the wave. There's, just up, cut back, up, down, cut back, nothing fancy. As far as my surf skating journey goes, I've tried a bunch of different Carver CXs. I've tried Carver C7, Yamaraki, which I have, Smooth Star, Waterborne, Swell Tech. As far as between the C7 and the CX, I would say for surfing, the CX you could say is more like a shortboard with the snappiness of like a snap on a wave and the snap on the CX. But I'm going to say if I were choosing, like if you want to get closer to surf training, I would say the C7. I think it's closer to maybe the Yamaraki, more swingy, more, kind of flowy. A lot of people have described it. I think that's closer to surfing personally than the CX is. The CX is very good. I don't think you can go wrong, particularly if you do get the bushings, the different bushings that Steve recommends. There's a million different kinds, but if you do switch out your bushing, you can make this quite loose. But I still would not say this is as surfy as a C7. It feels more like a surfboard to me. That's the best I can explain. I would choose a C7 if I'm going to go surf training.